Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. You're watching India Today Global. Breaking news coming in at the top of this bulletin. Trump has upped the ante over Greenland, threatens to slap tariffs on nations that don't go along. That's the news that's just coming in. This is the latest from President Trump himself after the statements that came from the Denmark foreign minister after meetings in the White House, and the statements from Greenland. Countries that have come out in support are going to face tariffs. Trump says he may put a tariff on countries that don't go along with Greenland. A big statement. Listen in first to what he had to say.
And I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen.
Well, this is a major threat against all those European allies who have stood by Denmark. President Trump says tariffs against those countries. Now, European allies led by Denmark have begun sending a symbolic number of troops to Greenland to demonstrate collective NATO commitment to Arctic security following high-level talks with U.S. officials. The United States says the deployments do not affect President Trump's goal of acquiring Greenland, a stance strongly rejected by Denmark, France, and other European leaders. France has reinforced its military presence, while Russia has dismissed claims it plans to occupy Greenland, reaffirming it is a Danish territory. Mahashweta Lala with this detailed report.
A day after foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland met US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Denmark and European allies including France, Germany, the UK, Norway, Sweden and the Netherlands have started sending symbolic number of troops to Nuuk. The movement of troops is being seen as a show for the security of the Arctic.
Yes, there is now participation from a large number of European countries, including some of the Nordic nations. And we are currently experiencing that there are several countries that offer and can contribute, both in terms of personal, but also in terms of capacity. I don't have a total number, but it is clear that we now will be able to plan for a larger and more permanent presence throughout 2026. And that is crucial to show that the security in the Arctic is not only for the Kingdom of Denmark, it is for all of NATO.
A bipartisan US congressional delegation landed in Copenhagen in an attempt to show unity between the United States and Denmark. Senator Chris Coons from Delaware is leading the trip. The meet also comes after Danish Foreign Minister described the meeting with Trump's top officials constructive, but the perspective continues to differ. Reacting to the troop movement into Greenland, White House denied any changes in the acquisition of Greenland.
Well, to your first question on Greenland, I don't think troops in Europe impact the president's decision-making process, nor does it impact his goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all.
France has committed to sending in more troops to Greenland. Meanwhile, in an interview with the Financial Times, French Finance Minister Roland Lescure said he had told his American counterpart, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, that any attempt to seize Greenland would represent a crossed line and endanger the economic relationship between the United States and the European Union.
Au Groenland, territoire autonome du Royaume de Danemark.
In Greenland, an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, Europeans have a particular responsibility because this territory belongs to the European Union and is also that of one of our NATO allies. France has decided to join the exercise that was scheduled and launched by Denmark in a sovereign and independent manner as part of the Arctic endurance. A first team of French soldiers is already on site and will be reinforced in the coming days by land, air and sea means.
Rebutting Trump's claims that Russia or China plans to occupy Greenland, Moscow has also said it considers Greenland as part of Denmark. Days before Trump sent out a message to NATO to throw out China and Russia. He also claimed that Denmark could not protect Greenland with dog sleds and only the United States could save Greenland from being occupied by China and Russia.
Neither Russia nor China have announced any such plans to occupy Greenland. There is no factual information that could support such accusations. That is the first point.
We, of course, like the rest of the world, are monitoring the situation around Greenland. we are noting a very contradictory situation. We proceed from the fact that Greenland is the territory of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Greenland has been reiterating that it's not up for sale and does not want to be owned by the United States. It is located in the Arctic region and is an autonomous territory of Denmark. Its strategic position between the US, Europe and Russia makes it vital for the United States. Rich in natural resources like gas and oil, rare earth metals, it will give the United States an upper hand over China, which presently is the world's largest producer and processor of rare earth minerals. As Arctic ice melts, accessibility to the northern shipping routes throughout the year will become more important. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And to discuss this, I'm being joined by Dr. Walid Faris. He's a former advisor, foreign policy advisor to President Donald Trump. Dr. Faris, thank you so much for joining me here. You're joining me from Washington, D.C., and we know what the focus has been of the American administration when it comes to various aspects. But Greenland has become top focus. You're seeing Trump administration now impose tariffs on countries that go out in support of Greenland. But it's not just during the second term. He has been focused and was focused even during his first term. This comes at a time when we're looking at France sending troops, UK a symbolic gesture by sending one soldier, Macron visiting Greenland. In such a scenario, where do you see Trump administration position itself?
It's going to be a lot of negotiations. We all know that the US and the European Union are all members of the NATO. So if the option is taking Greenland and losing NATO, it needs a lot of thinking, especially in the Congress, in the United States Congress. We cannot let go of our partners. On the other hand, the Trump administration is making the case that Greenland is under threat. They concluded that Russian and Chinese interests are increasing their patrolling of the area, and maybe they could control some of the spots in Greenland, which will be considered by the Trump administration as a strategic threat. So that's why the administration said we will take it no matter what. But indications and information that we have lead to believe that there could be other than taking the island. For example, one that is not yet declared but could become a solution is to lease it. There has been cases around the world where leasing was permitted, including in the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, and other places, where you can have an actual signed contract of leasing, 50 years, 100 years. The sovereignty will remain under Denmark, therefore under Europe, but the use of the island will be by the United States. That's one of the scenarios that could resolve the problem.
Right, Dr. Walid, that's a very important aspect that you're sharing with us when it comes to Greenland being able to be leased to the United States of America. But I also want you to weigh in on another story that we're focusing on, something that you focus on, Iran. Now, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting on deadly protests in Iran at the request of the United States, as President Trump kept his response options unclear. Washington welcomed Iran's decision to halt executions, impose new sanctions, and voiced support for Iranian protesters, drawing a sharp warning from Tehran against any aggression.
The United Nations Security Council called in an emergency meeting to discuss deadly protests in Iran at the request of the United States, as President Donald Trump left unclear as to what actions would be taken against the theocratic regime. The meeting was convened after Trump, in a post on Truth Social, welcomed the decision by the Iranian judiciary to cancel the execution of 26-year-old Irfan Soltani, followed by U.S. Treasury sanctioning 18 Iranian individuals and entities, along with a warning by the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that the United States will track the regime down, and asked Khamenei to join the U.S. till there was time.
Thank you, Mr. President, for chairing today's
U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, called the Iranian protesters brave and said the U.S. and President Trump stood by them.
President Donald J. Trump and the United States of America stands by the brave people of Iran, period. And regardless of its excuses, and you will hear many today from the Iranian regime and from its friends, The regime is solely responsible for the economic misery of the Iranian people and the repression of their freedom, and they will be held accountable.
It is deeply regrettable.
The statement was strongly rebuked by Iran's deputy ambassador to the United Nations, who warned that any direct or indirect aggression will have a legal befitting reply.
Iran seeks neither escalation nor confrontation. However, any act of aggression, direct or indirect, will be met with a decisive, proportionate, and lawful response under Article 51 of the Charter. This is not a threat. It is a statement of legal reality. Responsibility for all consequences will rest solely with those who initiate such unlawful acts.
Meanwhile, the White House said the situation is being monitored closely.
The truth is, only President Trump knows what he's going to do, and a very, very small team of advisors are read into his thinking on that. And as I just told you, he continues to closely monitor the situation on the ground in Iran. And as we saw yesterday, he had heard that the killings and executions would stop. And we have seen 800 people, their lives have been spared as a result of that. The president continues to closely monitor, but also keep all of his options on the table.
In her father's arms.
Amid the exchange of barbs, Iranian journalist and political dissent Masih Alinejad broke down in tears at the United Nations as she read out the names of people she said were killed during protests in Iran.
I feel guilty that I don't name the rest.
The tension continues in Tehran and in other provinces. Dozens of Iranians protested outside Iran's embassy in the Georgian capital. Protesters were chanting slogans, holding Iranian and Israeli flags, and photos of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah of Iran and a prominent figure. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also spoken separately to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and said Moscow was willing to mediate for bringing peace in the region.
A phone conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has already happened today. We will inform you of the results of a phone conversation with Iranian President Pezeshkian very soon. The situation in the region is quite tense, and the president is continuing his efforts to help de-escalate it.
The US-based HRANA rights group says it has verified the deaths of 2,435 protesters and 153 government-affiliated individuals in the unrest. Iranian authorities had blamed the United States for fueling the protest. Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
Dr. Faris, if I could draw you in again, a military intervention by America is looking unlikely. What changed? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey?
Thank you for having me, number one. And number two, that's what is seen in the media because statements are being made. And mostly because President Trump, in one or maybe two of his tweets and posts, has said, including a statement he made, that now killing has stopped. What he did not say, number one, was it has stopped because there is a curfew, because people cannot go to demonstrations at this point in time, and the troops are taking the streets, taking the towns, the villages, but that is not a guarantee that the war, that the suppression by the regime has stopped. Second, there is a kind of a preparation. So those events have happened very quickly, developed very sharply. We're talking about at least 12,000 people were killed. This is a magnitude that is very, very rare in the Middle East with that speed. But the other experts are sharing with us from the close to the administration that what President Trump has tweeted and promised that he is going to help the Iranian protesters. He said in a tweet, which is still there, that you need to continue with your expression, take the institutions, move forward, we are with you, and we will act. Now, between that statement and the preparation, in reality, nothing has changed. If you look at the map, you see task forces, you see preparations, you see evacuations, etc. Remember that Israel also could be one of the targeted sites by the regime if there is an action. And Israel, according to the information, needed time to prepare itself.
Right, that might be the case, but Dr. Faris, West Asia is concerned. Saudi Arabia is looking at status quo because any change would mean that Iran would be kosher, Iranian oil would be kosher, and Saudi Arabia will feel the brunt of it the most.
Yes, but 12,000 people killed is more important than any oil deal in the world. I know if you are in a multinational corporation, oil corporation, a government that produces, you do the calculation without the lives of people. But once a massacre of this size has taken place, then the calculations are different. We've seen it in Yugoslavia. There were a lot of interests, but the international community intervened to stop the massacres. We've seen this in many places in Africa and also in Asia. So the goal of the Trump administration is to stop the killing. But then what happened after that is not necessarily an American control of Iran. Iran is a very large country of 90 million, nothing compared to India. It has its own talents, its own bureaucracies. What needs to happen is a multi-ethnic, pluralistic government to take over, and they will normalize the markets. Of course, everybody else who produces oil will have to match with the changes. We don't match geopolitics with oil, but oil with geopolitics.
Okay. On that note, Dr. Waleed Faris, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Now, Indian government said it is engaging with the United States to ensure its operations at Iran's Chabahar port continue under a time-bound sanctions waiver granted by Washington, set to expire in April 2026. Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal stated that the U.S. Treasury Department had issued a letter on October 28, 2025, notifying India of an unconditional sanctions waiver. Listen in to what he had to say.
जैसा कि आपको पता है 28 अक्टूबर 2025 को यूएस के ट्रेजरी विभाग ने एक चिट्ठी जारी की थी हम लोगों को। उस चिट्ठी में उसमें अनकंडीशनल सैंक्शंस वेवर की बारे में जानकारी थी और ये जो अनकंडीशनल वेवर है, जो सैंक्शन वेवर हमको मिला है, आपको पता है जैसे कि वो 26 अप्रैल 2026 तक वैध है। हम इस व्यवस्था पर काम करने के लिए यूएस पक्ष के साथ बातचीत कर रहे हैं।
Well, critical decision over here by the Indian government to engage the United States of America, who had granted India a 6-month exemption for Chabahar-related activities after the previous waiver expired, providing temporary relief to India's connectivity plans. But the recent sanctions clearly are weighing heavily on what will happen next to the Chabahar port. For now, while there were reports that India is disengaging, it does seem like at this point in time, India is engaging the State Department to ensure that Chabahar remains relevant for India. Now, with that, we bring you some other stories from across the world and World at a Glance.
U.S. security forces fired tear gas at protesters who gathered near the Whipple Federal Building over a surge in immigration agents on the street of Minneapolis. U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy military forces in Minnesota after days of angry protest over a surge in immigration agents on the streets of Minneapolis. CIA Director Director Ratcliffe met Venezuelan interim president Delcy Rodriguez in Caracas. The two-hour meeting was aimed at building trust and communication following the capture of Venezuela's former president Nicolas Maduro. Both discussed potential economic collaboration, and it took place on the same day Rodriguez gave her first State of the Union address since taking over as interim president. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada and China have struck an initial trade deal that will slash tariffs on electric vehicles and canola as both nations promise to tear down trade barriers while forging new strategic ties. The first Canadian Prime Minister to visit China since 2017, Carney is seeking to rebuild ties with his country's second largest trading partner after the United States, following months of diplomatic efforts. The FBI conducted a search of Washington Post reporter's home in search of alleged classified information, according to the newspaper. The reporter Hannah Nathanson was at her home in Virginia when FBI agents knocked on her door to execute the search warrant, the newspaper reported. Agents seized a phone, 2 laptop computers, one of which was issued to her by the Washington Post, and a Garmin watch. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said documents related to a deal between Ukraine and the United States on the war in Ukraine could be signed at Davos next week if terms are agreed. A Ukrainian delegation is traveling to the United States for negotiations on security guarantees and a prosperity package in the event of a ceasefire. Ashley Clare, the mother of one of Elon Musk's children, sued Musk XAI, alleging that the company's AI chatbot, Grok, generated sexually explicit deepfake images of her without her consent. Clare's lawsuit came after XAI confirmed that the Grok chatbot would no longer edit images of real people in revealing clothing.
That's all on India Today Global. But before I go, we leave you with these pictures of Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, who gave away her Nobel Peace Prize medal to U.S. President Donald Trump during a White House meeting. A White House official confirmed that Trump intends to keep the medal. Machado said the gift was in recognition of what she called his commitment to the freedom of the Venezuelan people. With that, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye, have a great weekend, and take care.